There is a scripture that has been recited in India for 1500 years without interruption. In temples, in homes, in times of crisis and times of celebration. It is called the Devi Mahatmyam, the glory of the goddess. And the tradition says even one verse of it, heard at the right moment, can change the course of a life. This scripture contains 700 sacred verses across 13 chapters. But before those 13 chapters begin, three ancient texts are recited as preparation. First, the Devi Kavacham, the armor of the goddess. Every part of your body, from the crown of your head to the soles of your feet, is placed under the protection of the goddess before the recitation begins. Then,
ता नमस्तस्यै 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 नमो नमः या देवी सर्वभूतेषु छायारूपेण संस्थिता नमस्तस्यै 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 नमो नमः या देवी सर्वभूतेषु शक्तिरूपेण संस्थिता नमस्तस्यै 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 नमो नमः या देवी सर्वभूतेषु
the Argala
तृष्णारूपेण
Stotram, the
संस्थिता
key. This
नमस्तस्यै
unlocks the full power
नमस्तस्यै
and benefit of what
नमस्तस्यै
is about to
नमो
be heard.
नमः
And finally,
या देवी सर्वभूतेषु क्षान्तिरूपेण संस्थिता नमस्तस्यै 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 नमो नमः या देवी सर्वभूतेषु जातिरूपेण संस्थिता नमस्तस्यै 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 नमो नमः या देवी सर्वभूतेषु लज्जारूपेण संस्थिता नमस्तस्यै
the Kilaka
नमस्तस्यै
Stotram, the pin.
नमस्तस्यै नमो
This locks
नमः
the blessings in place
या
so that what
देवी
is received is not
सर्वभूतेषु
lost.
शान्तिरूपेण संस्थिता नमस्तस्यै 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 नमो नमः या देवी सर्वभूतेषु श्रद्धारूपेण संस्थिता नमस्तस्यै 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 नमो नमः या देवी सर्वभूतेषु कान्तिरूपेण संस्थिता नमस्तस्यै 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 नमो नमः या देवी सर्वभूतेषु लक्ष्मीरूपेण संस्थिता.
Only then does the Devi Mahatmyam itself begin. The 13 chapters are divided into three great episodes called the Three Charitas. The first, Prathama Charita, is the story of Mahakali destroying the demons Madhu and Kaitava. This is the destruction of tamas, the darkness of delusion and greed that sits at the very root of the mind. The second, Madhyama Charita, is the story of Mahalakshmi defeating the buffalo demon Mahishasura. This is the destruction of Rajas, the turbulent, shape shifting pride of the ego that reinvents itself every time it is threatened. The third and longest, Uttamacharita, is the story of Mahasaraswati defeating Shumbha and Nishumbha and the armies of demons that serve them. This is the destruction of the subtlest enemy, the refined spiritual pride that believes it has already arrived, the last and most difficult veil between the soul and liberation. Together, the three charitas map the complete inner journey, from the dissolution of fundamental ignorance, through the purification of ego and pride, to the final surrender of even the most subtle sense of self. The tradition says, one who completes all three charitas with sincere attention receives the fruit of all three simultaneously: the dissolution of delusion, the defeat of ego, and the grace of liberation. This is why the Devi Mahatmyam is recited across 9 nights of Navratri, one charita per day across the first 4 days, and the Uttama Charita, the longest and deepest, filling the remaining five. Now, let us understand what the tradition says happens when you listen to this text. One who hears it with devotion is freed from disease, from fear, from bondage. The one who faces impossible danger finds the goddess herself standing between them and harm. The one who is bound is freed. The one who is afraid finds fearlessness arising from within, like a lamp lit in a dark room. And the goddess herself declares, wherever this scripture is recited, in whatever village, in whatever home, in whatever place, I will be present. Not symbolically, present, as a force, as a protection, as a living awareness that watches over those who honor her. The Devi Mahatmyam begins with two broken men: Suratha, a king who lost his kingdom through betrayal, his treasury seized by his own ministers, his capital taken by enemies, everything he had built gone. Vaishya, a merchant whose own wife and children turned against him when the wealth ran out. discarded by the family he had loved and provided for. Both wandered into the forest, both carrying the same bewildering question: why do we cling so desperately to things we know are impermanent? They found the sage Medhas. He listened with the patience of one who has heard every variation of human suffering and still finds it worthy of complete attention. He said, "What you are experiencing is not weakness. It is the work of Mahamaya, the great illusion, which deludes even the wise. The same power that holds you in attachment is the power that can release you. She is the goddess. Let me tell you about her." And the
The
Devi
Devi
Mahatmyam
Mahatmyam now
began.
enters its first great episode, the Pratama Charita, the story of Mahakali, the destruction of the deepest darkness. At the end of a great cosmic cycle, when the universe had dissolved and all beings had returned to their seed state, Lord Vishnu rested on the cosmic waters on the great serpent Shesha. He was in a state called Yoga Nidra, the conscious sleep of yoga, neither waking nor sleeping, but resting in the still ground of awareness that underlies everything. And Yoga Nidra, that cosmic sleep, was the goddess herself in her most subtle form. She is the power that holds even Vishnu in rest. Without her, not even Vishnu can act. This is the first teaching of the Devi Mahatmyam. The goddess is not a subordinate deity. She is the very Shakti, the energy, without which nothing in this universe can move. From the earwax of the sleeping Vishnu arose two demons, Madhu and Kaitaba, born from the residue of darkness and turbulent energy. They saw Brahma seated on the lotus rising from Vishnu's navel and moved to destroy him. Brahma could not awaken Vishnu because Yoga Nidra held him. So Brahma prayed, not to Vishnu, to the power that held Vishnu, to the goddess herself. He prayed with a hymn of extraordinary beauty, acknowledging her as the ground of all existence, as the one power behind all other powers, and asked her to release Vishnu so that he could protect the universe. She heard, she withdrew, and Vishnu awakened. He fought Madhu and Kaitaba for 5,000 years, because these two demons had received a boon that they could only die at a time of their own choosing. They were effectively indestructible as long as they did not consent to their own death. Then Vishnu did something extraordinary. He offered them a boon. The demons, intoxicated by their own power, said, "Ask what you wish, we will grant it." Vishnu said, "I ask only this, that you allow me to kill you." There was silence. Even in their arrogance, they had to honor the logic of what had just happened. They said, "Then kill us where the ground is not covered with water." Vishnu looked around. The entire cosmos was covered with the waters of dissolution. There was no dry ground anywhere. He placed them on his own thighs, making his own body the altar of the sacrifice, and destroyed them there. From their marrow and fat, the tradition says, the earth itself was formed. The demons who threatened creation became, in their dissolution, the very ground on which creation would stand. Madhu and Kaitaba represent Moha and Lobha, delusion and greed, the two fundamental distortions of the mind from which every other affliction grows. The goddess in her form as Mahakali does not destroy these through brute force. She allows them to exhaust themselves in their own pride, until that very pride becomes the instrument of their destruction. This is how delusion ends, not by fighting it, but by seeing it completely. The Pratama Charita is complete. The darkness at the root of the mind has been met and dissolved. The second episode now begins. The Devi Mahatmyam now enters its second great episode, the Madhyama Charita, the story of Mahalakshmi, the destruction of the shape-shifting ego, the birth of the goddess from the combined light of every god who ever existed. The demon Mahishasur had performed long and terrible austerities and received a boon. He could not be killed by any man or any god. He used this boon to conquer the three worlds. He drove the gods from heaven. He appropriated their offerings, their rituals, their very identities. The Devas wandered the earth in exile, powerless, humiliated, their very existence threatened. Brahma led the gods to Vishnu and Shiva. They listened, and a great anger arose in them. Not the small anger of wounded pride, but the concentrated force of all divine energy finding its absolute limit. From that anger, from each god simultaneously, a stream of blazing light poured forth. From Vishnu came a stream. From Shiva came a stream. From Brahma, from Indra, from Yama, from Varuna, from Agni, from Vayu, from every divine power in existence, a stream of light poured out. These streams met, and they merged, and from the convergence arose a form, a woman, not a small woman, a woman who filled the universe. Her face was formed from the light of Shiva, her arms from the brilliance of Vishnu, her hair from the fire of Yama, her breasts from the light of the moon, her waist from Indra's thunder, her feet from Varuna, her eyes from Agni, her eyebrows from the two twilights. Each god then offered her a weapon. Vishnu gave his Sudarshana Chakra, Shiva gave his Trishula, Varuna gave his conch, Agni gave his spear, Indra gave his thunderbolt, Yama gave his staff of death. The sun filled every pore of her skin with his rays. Kubera gave his drinking cup. The Devi Mahatmyam says she blazed like 10,000 suns, filling the three worlds with her laughter, shaking the very foundations of the cosmos with the sound of her arrival. The gods wept with joy. After all the years of exile and humiliation, something had come into the world that Mahishasura's boon had simply not accounted for. He could not be killed by any man or any god, but she was neither. She was the goddess. Mahishasura heard the sound of her laughter and felt the earth shake. He sent his generals one by one, each more powerful than the last. Chikshura, Chamara, Udagra, Mahahanu. Each came with vast armies. Each was destroyed. The goddess fought with skill, with fury, with grace, and with what can only be described as dark humor. Her lion roared, her weapons flashed, the mountains trembled. When all the generals had fallen, Mahishasura came himself. And here the Devi Mahatmyam gives us one of its most profound teachings. Because Mahishasura did not fight in one form, he became a buffalo, then a lion, then a man, then an elephant, then a buffalo again, shifting shape constantly, impossible to pin down, taking a new identity the moment the old one was threatened. This is the nature of the ego. It does not stand and fight, it shapeshifts. When spiritual practice threatens one form of ego, it simply becomes another form. The person attached to wealth becomes attached to renunciation. The one attached to power becomes attached to the idea of being powerless. The ego is not a fixed thing, it is a strategy, a constant redefinition of the self in whatever terms most effectively preserve the sense of separation. The goddess finally caught Mahishasura in the act of transformation, half buffalo, half man, emerging from the buffalo's neck. And in that vulnerable moment of incomplete identity, she struck. She placed her foot on his neck and drove her spear through his heart. The three worlds erupted in joy. Flowers rained from the heavens. The great drums of the gods sounded. The wind became fragrant. And then the gods sang. What they sang is called the Devi Stuti, the great hymn to the goddess, and it is one of the theological peaks of the entire Devi Mahatmyam. They said, "You are the intelligence by which the entire universe is sustained. You are the sleep in which all beings rest. You are the hunger and the thirst and the satisfaction. You are the power of Brahma's creation, of Vishnu's preservation, of Shiva's dissolution. Without you, not one of them can perform a single act. You are the mother of the universe, not in the sentimental sense alone, but in the most precise philosophical sense. You are the womb from which all of existence emerges and the ground to which it returns." And then they said something that stops the mind completely. Your true enemy is not a demon. Your true enemy is delusion. Your true enemy is the hardened heart. Your true enemy is the person who has built such a thick wall of pride and self sufficiency that they cannot receive grace, cannot be moved by beauty, cannot be touched by love. The gods concluded by asking her to protect the world always, and she smiled. And she said, "Whenever the world is in danger, I will appear. Wherever devotion calls me, I will come." The Madhyama Charita is complete. The shape shifting ego has met its end. The third and deepest episode now begins. The Devi Mahatmyam now enters its third and longest episode, the Uttama Charita. The story of Mahasaraswati, the destruction of the most subtle enemy of all, not gross darkness, not turbulent pride, but the refined spiritual ego that believes it has already arrived. This episode requires 9 full chapters because the enemy it addresses is the most persistent and the most difficult to recognize. The pattern is familiar. Two demon brothers, Shumbha and Nishumbha, have conquered the three worlds and driven the gods from heaven once again. They have taken everything: the offerings of the yajnas, the light of the sun and moon, the rains, the winds. The gods gather on the banks of the Ganga and praise the goddess, asking her to appear. The goddess appears on the Himalayas in her most beautiful form, Ambika, radiant, serene, complete. Shumba hears of her and sends a messenger with an extraordinary proposal: marry me. He lists his conquests, his powers, his beauty. He believes the goddess should simply accept his superiority and come to him willingly. The goddess smiles. She says, I made a foolish vow in my childhood that I would only accept as husband one who defeats me in battle, who is equal to me in strength, who can counter my pride. She was not refusing Shumba with anger. She was pointing him toward the only encounter that could possibly serve him, a real confrontation with a power greater than his own. Shumba hears only the refusal. He sends his first general, Dhumralochana, the smoky eyed one, with an army of 60,000. The goddess destroys him with a single breath. A humba, one sacred sound, and Dhumralochana is gone. Her lion dispatches the remaining army. The ease of this destruction is itself a teaching. The demons of the Uttama Charita are not defeated through elaborate battle, but through progressively more concentrated expressions of divine power, because the enemy they represent is more subtle and closer to home. Shumba sends Chanda and Munda next, his greatest generals, with an army of tens of thousands. They arrive in a formation that darkens the sky. The goddess looks at this vast army, and something extraordinary happens on her face. She does not become afraid. She does not summon reinforcements. Her brow furrows with concentration, and from the darkness between her eyebrows, another goddess leaps forth. Black as the night sky, wearing a garland of skulls, her mouth stretched in a terrible grin, eyes red as sunset, tongue lolling and hungry. This was Kali, the goddess of time and death and the dissolution of all forms. Kali laughed. The laugh was not cruel, it was the laughter of absolute fearlessness, the laughter of the one who knows that death is not an ending, but a transformation. She swept through the demon army like fire through dry grass. She picked up demons and crushed them in her jaws. She drank their blood. She danced through the battlefield with a joy that the living found terrifying precisely because it was genuine. Chanda and Munda fell to her scythe. She brought their heads to the goddess, swinging them like trophies. And from that act she received her name, Chamunda, the destroyer of Chanda and Munda. But Shumba was not finished. He sent Raktabija, the demon who possessed the most devastating boon any warrior could imagine. Every drop of his blood that touched the ground would instantly give rise to another demon of exactly his size and power. Cut him once, and a dozen arise. Cut a dozen, and hundreds arise. Wound him deeply enough, and the army becomes uncountable. The divine army fought Raktabija and found themselves overwhelmed. Every weapon that drew blood created more enemies. The battlefield was filling with Raktabija copies. And this is exactly what Raktabija represents: Vasna, the deep impressions in the unconscious mind that produce desire after desire. You cannot defeat Vasanas by cutting them one by one. They regenerate. The only solution is what Kali represents: the complete burning of the field from which they arise. The goddess called Kali again, and Kali's solution was simple and absolute: drink the blood before it touches the ground. As the goddess and the seven divine matrikas attacked Raktabija, Kali stretched her enormous tongue across the entire battlefield and caught every single drop of blood before it could create a new demon. She drank and drank, becoming intoxicated with the blood, dancing more wildly, growing more terrible and more luminous simultaneously. When Raktabija finally fell, there was nothing left of him to seed anything. The cycle of multiplication was broken. With Raktabija destroyed, the battle entered its final phase. Nishumba, the younger and in some ways more powerful of the two brothers, came himself. The goddess matched him weapon for weapon, strategy for strategy. When she pierced him through the chest with her spear, a second figure leapt from the wound, declaring, I am free. The goddess severed that second figure's head before it could take form. This detail is extraordinary. Even at the moment of death, the demon attempts to reassert itself in a new form.
The ego's last act is always to reframe its own defeat as a kind of transcendence, to turn even the experience of surrender into a new identity. Nishumbha fell. Then Shumbha came himself, and the final battle of the Devi Mahatmyam is unlike all the others, because it is not primarily a physical battle, it is a philosophical confrontation. Shumbha looked at the battlefield, his entire army destroyed, his brother dead, and he said something that was, in its way, a genuine question. He said, "You claim to have won this battle, but look around you. You did not fight alone. You called Kali, you called the Matrikas, you called the powers of the gods. What is your real strength if you needed all of them?" The goddess smiled. She said, "I am alone. I have always been alone. Look again." And before Shumbha's eyes, Kali, the Matrikas, all the divine forms, each one re entered the goddess's body. One by one, every form that had arisen from her dissolved back into her. She stood alone, singular, luminous, the battlefield quiet around her. She said, "All of these were my own powers, expressed in forms appropriate to what was needed. There is no other here. There never was." This is the Advaita, the non dual teaching, expressed not through philosophy but through action. Every apparent multiplicity of powers, every different name and form of the divine, these are not separate beings. They are expressions of the one Shakti, the one consciousness, taking the forms required by each moment. And then she fought Shumbha. He rose into the sky and she followed him. The battle was extraordinary, in the air, in space itself, beyond the earth. And finally she threw him down and drove her spear through him, and Shumbha was no more. The universe erupted in joy for the third and final time. The gods sang, the rishis gave blessings, flowers fell from the sky, and then the gods sang the Narayani Stuti, the most complete and celebrated hymn of the entire Uttamacharita. They said, "You are the one who protects those who take refuge in you. You are the remover of all suffering. You are the eternal Shakti behind creation, preservation, and dissolution. Whenever there are multitudes of afflictions in this world, then and then again, descending, you will remove them." And she promised. She said, "Whenever this world is burdened, whenever the forces of darkness become too strong, I will be born again. I will appear. Not in one form, in whatever form the moment requires." The Uttama Charita is complete. The most subtle of all enemies, the spiritual pride that believes itself already arrived, has been seen completely and dissolved. The complete path has been walked, from the dissolution of fundamental ignorance in the first episode, through the defeat of turbulent ego in the second, to the final surrender of even the most refined sense of self in
Namo
this third.
Devyai
The
Mahadevyai
goddess has
Shivayai
accompanied us through
Satatam
all
Namaha.
three, sometimes
Namah
fierce,
Prakrityai
sometimes
Bhadrayai
radiant,
Niyata
always
Pranata
present,
Smatam.
always working
Ya
toward the
Devi
same end, that
Sarvabhuteshu
you should know
Cheta
what you
Netya
actually are.
Vidhiyate. Namastasyai 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 Namo Namaha. Ya Devi Sarvabhuteshu Buddhirupena Samsthita. Namastasyai 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 Namo Namaha. Ya Devi Sarvabhuteshu Nidrarupena Samsthita. Namastasyai 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 Namo Namaha. Ya Devi Sarvabhuteshu Kshudharupena Samsthita. Namastasyai 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 Namo Namaha. Ya Devi Sarvabhuteshu Chayarupena Samsthita. Namastasyai 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 Namo Namaha. Ya Devi Sarvabhuteshu Shaktirupena Samsthita. Namastasyai 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 Namo Namaha. Ya Devi Sarvabhuteshu Trishna-rupena Samsthita. Namastasyai 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 Namo Namaha. Ya Devi Sarvabhuteshu Kshanti-rupena Samsthita. Namastasyai 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 Namo Namaha. Ya Devi Sarvabhuteshu Jati-rupena Samsthita. Namastasyai 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 Namo Namaha. Ya Devi Sarvabhuteshu Lajja-rupena Samsthita. Namastasyai 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 Namo Namaha. Ya Devi Sarvabhuteshu Shanti-rupena Samsthita. नमस्तस्यै 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 नमो नमः। या देवी सर्वभूतेषु श्रद्धारूपेण संस्थिता, नमस्तस्यै 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 नमो नमः। या देवी सर्वभूतेषु कान्तिरूपेण संस्थिता, नमस्तस्यै 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 नमो नमः। या देवी सर्वभूतेषु लक्ष्मीरूपेण संस्थिता, नमस्तस्यै 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 नमो नमः। या देवी